Enough about me, let's talk about me. Isn't that what we're here for?
Yep.
Not to talk about me, to talk about yourself. First of all, it's not bragging if it's a fact. If you did the work to earn it, it's a fact. It's not a subjective point of view, it is a fact. It's not saying on a resume that I'm really good, so you should read this and look at me. It's saying here are all the facts about me. Here's why you should hire me. The one thing I will tell you to walk away with from today, go back on your calendar immediately and put every 3 months, update my resume and any other profiles that you have that talk about you. Because the exercise on a quarterly basis should be a 5-minute exercise. It should not be a painful 3 or 4 hour exercise every time someone says resume and you print. One of the hardest things it is for people is to talk about themselves or even to write about themselves and say, here are the great things that I've done. It is not bragging if it is a fact. What I like to call this program is bringing your story alive. Because this resume that you have, whether it's 1, 2, or 7 pages, and we'll get to that, is your book. And someone should say, should I read this book on you? Or do I get to the first chapter and I'm bored and I close it and you don't even get an interview? In order for you to bring your story alive, you have to differentiate yourself from the masses. Is there a right or wrong style? Is there a right or wrong way to do these things? The only wrong way is if you have spelling and grammatical errors all over the place, because I will tell you as an interviewer, I will stop reading. If you have manger, then it should say manager. Spell check, by the way, is not your best editor. On a quarterly basis, when that thing pops up and it says update your resume, the things that you need to be doing are 1, showing it to anyone and everyone who wants to read it. Everyone, welcome to Tom Dowd's resume. Feel free to send me any feedback you have on it. It's been given out to hundreds of people. Maybe someday you guys will give me a job. I've gotten more feedback from people saying, hey, take a look at this, or did you realize it looked like this, or maybe you want to tweak this. I want everyone to see it. A lot of times we hold our resumes to our best. I want you on a quarterly basis to individually say, how do I want to look at this thing? One quarter it may pop up and I might want to print it and just read through it. That's how I found my typo. Because the other times I've gone through it and I've just updated certain accomplishments. So I have a place where I kind of take notes on all my key accomplishments I want to add. So I know on a quarterly basis I'm going to go to those notes and write it in there. On another quarterly basis, I might read it backwards. Why would I want to do something crazy like that?
New perspective?
New perspective. So you're going to pick up on some things maybe you didn't do before. And that doesn't mean read the words backwards. It means just start from the bottom and move up. So let's hit some of the questions and then we'll start to put these little pieces together. How many pages? I don't care. Before you say, boy, that was a pompous answer. You will get a variety of answers from HR experts, and they and them, and they want to see this. And put it to paper what you think your experience deserves. Personally, I think anything longer than 3, you're starting to get that book that starts to get some yawns that are attached to it. The key to that is you have to ensure that it reads from top to bottom for 1 to 2 to 3 pages, that it is worth reading for those 1 to 2 to 3 pages. Because I'm going to stop reading if it's not. What is the best style? Is it bullets? Is it a summary? Is it both? What's the best way? Some people say bullets, some say paragraphs, some say that whatever floats your boat. Whatever you are comfortable in doing. My personal preference, and remember, all that we're talking about today is my preference. You are ultimately the one who submits it. You are ultimately the one that works with it, and you are the one who makes the final decisions on it. When it comes to bullets, I have a mixture of both. So I'm not wasting a lot of space with full-blown sentences within paragraphs, so I'm making it compact, but I have a little bit of the bullet type style to how I write. for the resume. So it becomes compact, and so I'm maximizing my words and I'm maximizing my space. When it comes to bullets, you're taking up for tasks that you're doing. It's first of all, if you're listing your accomplishments that way, 1 through 10, if I'm reading that, I might get the perspective of, you've just given me your whole story, and if that's it, we're going to now start to have to make a judgment, is that worth reading or not? When you do the bullets, you're also wasting space a lot of times over to the right. I'm a huge fan of space. I want to maximize as much space as I can. So I like to do a mixture of both. That's just my style. When I first look at a resume and somebody hands it to me, what's the first thing I do? What's the first thing I don't do? Let me rephrase that. I look at it real quick. The first thing I don't do is read it. I look at it. And I want to see, where are my eyes automatically going? Of how deep do you go back? I would tell you to be creative. So what you might want to do is start batching some of the early stuff, or not invest so much of a description that's on there, to say, here are some additional skills that I have, or additional responsibilities that I had, or additional job, and then you can put them without dates, and you can you can wrap it all together towards the bottom half, so it can give you 10 years worth of stuff and detail, so they can say you have sales experience, you have this type of administration experience. So those are the experience you're still not letting go of, and someone can see that it's still there. So let's talk about, how do you write up a job description? Because some of the things that I've talked about is you've worked extremely hard, and some of you extremely long, to earn what you're putting down on your resume. Do you want 4 years worth of collection summed up with collected delinquent accounts? Do you want 4 years worth of hard work to come out that way? It does. But let's talk about the job description itself. If you are simply going to describe the job that you do, you are among the masses. If you say, I collect on accounts, I collect accounts that are past due, I collect the accounts that are delinquent, you are among the masses. If you say, I collect accounts that are 2 payments past due, you are a little bit further than the masses to distinguishing yourself, but you're still not there. I have a model that I like to use in how I write the job descriptions. And it would be, you need to explain what you're doing. Somebody needs to understand what the job is. I'm going to take the piece that you just said there and say, I'm going to write the description based off of the job that I'm applying for. I'm going to switch that up and say, write it as if somebody on the street is reading it and will be able to understand what it is. How many different types of resumes should you have out there? Should you have one for the inside, for where you are right now, and one for the outside? Some people say yes, some people say no. I say have one resume. It's a lot easier understanding. And the reason I say that is, it will force you to pay attention to the words that you're using. Stay away from acronyms. Stay away from terminology that is specific to the company you're working on. Unless you spell it out, and unless it can be clearly defined. So you don't want to come out and talk about a department that has a name this long, that has acronyms attached to it, when in simple terms, you collect it. Everybody on the street will understand what collections mean. We get so caught up in acronyms, and all of a sudden it becomes such a part of our normal vernacular that it lands on our resume as if it's completely normal, and someone looks at it and they say, huh? If you are creating huh or questions for someone reading your resume, you're inching it further off of their desk. You have to put it in layman's terms so people can understand it. Well, I would highly recommend using one resume. So you explain the job description in a layman's term that works for everybody. And then what I would suggest is having something in there that is powerful and gets my eyes and gets my attention. So if you are responsible for the collection of a $5 million portfolio on a monthly basis, put it down. $5 million just got my attention. in terms of let it get my attention, because what we don't do enough of is we say, okay, I oversee projects, I oversee people, I oversee a portfolio, but it doesn't have any context to me. So what I want as the reader of this is give me something to grab hold of had sales revenue of blank, had collections of blank. What you don't want to do though is put, I was able to collect, or I was able to hit this metric, 112% of this metric. Because once again, you're starting to move down this path of, it's a metric nobody's going to know about. The last thing I would put on there, what are 1, 2, or 3 of the key accomplishments that differentiates you from everyone else that's out there? That you hit your incentives X number of times over the last X number of months. You were a consistent top performer X number of months. You were considered in the top 10% within your division over X number of months. You were individually selected to oversee a project. You were on a task force for 2 months of blank doing blank. So all of a sudden, now I'm reading your job description goes beyond I collected accounts that were past due to I collected accounts that were past due. Wow, I didn't realize it was that meaningful and the value you added to this company. And whoa, in addition to that, you were able to accomplish this. Now you have my attention. Go ahead.
I was going to say, what about the embellishment though?
The embellishment. There is no such thing as an embellishment. I'm just kidding. There are facts. If it is a fact, it is not bragging. And what I will tell you when it comes to embellishment is you're taking the risk if you decide to stretch it as far as you can. I would use the facts that are out there that catch people's attention. What I would suggest, however, is be careful with your word choice. Let's go into the introductions and the objectives. What's the difference between what I have, which is considered I call it a profile, and an objective? What are the differences? My personal preference is obviously the profile. That's leading the witness by having my resume in front of you guys. But what I will tell you is the objective simply tells someone what they already know. If I'm reading the paper and it says you have these jobs available, and I say I want that job that you wrote in the paper, that's pretty much what you're saying, isn't it? Wasted space. Stay away from, I'm going to tell you what what you already know, and you go to the profile and you say, here's a summary of me. Here's my 15-second elevator speech for you to keep reading. It is the cover of the book that says, I should open the next page. It is the thing that will keep you reading through the first page, through the second page, and through the third page if there is one. And it says, here are all the things that I do well. Here's who I am. But within that are certain skills that are out there. And I define them as soft skills and hard skills. How would you define soft skills?
People skills.
People skills?
To get along with others.
Okay. Really nice, gets along with others, team player.
Multitask.
Can multitask,
Detail.
detail-oriented, great leader, good communicator,
Professional attitude, skills.
fantastic attitude, professional. What have I just told you? Everything that's expected.
Right.
You should be detail-oriented. You should be a people person. You should be a good leader. You should be able to communicate effectively. You haven't told me a whole lot that defines you. You've told me a whole lot that defines who you want to be and defines who can be in this position, but you haven't told me anything that differentiates myself with you. So I like to merge both of them together. And what you find is the minority are the ones that put the hard skills and match them in there nicely. They link them together so they're one next to each other. So if all you're talking about are these soft skills of a people person, I really have a good attitude, you haven't told me anything. But if you start saying that I have these skills that let me prove to you that I'm analytical. Let me prove to you that I understand credit underwriting. Let me prove to you that I understand service operations. Let me prove to you I am a project manager. All of a sudden, I'm taking these hard skills next to these soft skills and I'm putting them together, and guess what? Now I'm willing to keep reading to figure out how the rest of the story plays out with the details. Want to stay away from, though, as you're talking about the language you're writing, is you want to stay away from things that say, I was part of the team, I was along for the ride. Right. So I assisted on that project. I get the biggest laugh every time I say, took Six Sigma class. No, you went online, you spent 4 hours, and you took a class. You don't have your green belt, your black belt, your master black belt, and it's not that I'm really sitting there laughing at you saying, oh, you don't have your black belt. I'm laughing at the fact of you're trying to pull one over on me on paper. You talk about embellishment. That's a good example of you're trying to make yourself sound someone you are not because you're trying to fit into some mold somewhere. I would get real on your resume and say, what are the skills that you really have? And you start looking now at some of the power words that are out there that said, I lead, I execute, I initiated, I was the project lead, I was the one who did this, I was the one who led the execution of this, I was the one who did this, not I was along for the ride with my team. And when you start looking at assisted, supported, those types of words, you're really starting to diminish your own credibility a little bit by saying, you're among the masses again. You took yourself from differentiating yourself back into the masses. So some of the things you want to start looking for is, I would start looking through some of the papers if you're looking for outside work, and some of the papers that you want to, and look for some of the language that they're using, and say, can I make a correlation to that? The order of things. As I was talking a little bit about, on the back of these are some websites that you can go to. And the reason why I will tell you there is no right or wrong style when it comes to a resume is just go to these websites and every one of them will tell you a different thing. That should be your answer of relax. Put it in the style that you think works for you. Now when it comes to accounting and the very specific technical ones, you do want to put it where you're using your series and your certifications and those types of things right up top so people can see the things that you absolutely unequivocally have to have that are required for the job are seen first. However, most of the time, I would recommend that you put it in chronological order. Because, again, even though what you've done 10, 15, 20 years ago is of less value, it just means that's still part of your story, but you want your most recent story to be the one that comes alive. Now, there are a couple questions that have popped up relating to, well, what if I have a gap within my employment? I'd say that's okay. I mean, think of it in terms of, don't try to hide the gap. What I tell you is explain the gap. So go in and try to explain and listen. There was a reorganization that was going on. There were staffing reductions that went on, or whatever caused that gap. Be transparent to it. That's what the interviewer, the recruiter wants to see. And by the way, in the industry that we're within, the environment we're in right now, the economic environment, it's going to be a little bit more normal than it has been in the past. So relax. But just be careful, just take a look at it, make sure that you're telling your full story, and don't just leave that gap hanging out. When it comes to dates, I've seen people just put the year. I highly recommend you put the month and the year. What's that month and the year tell you? Just a couple things I've seen. I'm making flash judgments about you.
You're not trying to kind of fill over some of those gaps.
Okay, so some people potentially, unintentionally or intentionally, try to hide their gaps with just the year. The date also shows the connection points that you're making, and it also tells the whole story, and it also says you're detail oriented. You know exactly where you've been at all times.
I was guilty of what you said. I tried to hide the gaps because I'm afraid that they come up. But there was like medial work that I did in between that you don't want to clutter it up.
But if you've made the effort to go out and get employment, gainful employment, while you're waiting for what you think you should really be doing, is you may want to put, maybe there's a couple gaps that are on there. Maybe you do put an asterisk, and then on the bottom you say, during these periods of time, I was within the construction industry or retail business or whatever it might be. And now you can start, because what you want to be able to do is pull that string all the way through. So if I see a gap, explain the gap. And now I continue my story.
Should it be in the chronological aspect of that, or should I put that on like a footnote?
I would put it wherever you think it will be picked up in a way that is easily readable. So you may want to put, maybe if you have a couple gaps that are close by, maybe you put it right underneath the second gap.
During the gap, these periods, so.
You may want to just put an asterisk and then just put it on the end as a footnote. Because the other things that you want to be able to, I had somebody say, I only, and this drives me crazy, but they said, I only want you to have your last 10 years. Or I only want you to have your last 15 years. Or I only want you to have your experience while you were here at the company. And I'll tell you, anytime anyone ever tells you that, you come back to me and say, they were wrong. And the reason I say that is you have an entire story. You are who you are based off of your entire cumulative effect of all your experiences. So use those experiences and don't cut them off because someone says you don't need to have it. If you think it is an important part of who you are, find a way to include it. And that includes not just jobs. So you might be able to clean up a gap through volunteer work that you're doing. I just spent an hour with somebody talking to them about their resume, and they had right up front that they lost their job in January 2012. I would have never known until I had that conversation with him. He said, for the last 3 months, I've been a consultant in my own business, and this is what I do. I set up fundraising, and he told me all these speakers he puts together for these fundraising pieces, and all of a sudden, I would have never known. But and by the way, he wasn't hiding it, but it was written so well, it looked like it was a regular job. So you can, if you are investing your time somewhere else, volunteer work, if it is helpful in establishing who you are professionally, then make sure that it's written down.
How would you put that in with, like, would you put it in as under like a related work experience and this volunteer work? And I mean, how would you apply that? Because you know how you list your jobs. Would you put it in with your job?
Here's how I like the style of my resume to look, but again, it's purely my style. I like to have the work that you're doing overall. And so this is your business pieces of it. I like to segment it. I like to do things chronologically and then segment it. I do the jobs that I'm doing chronologically. And then I go in and say, what are the other things that are out there who make me the whole person that I am? And that includes volunteer activity, includes extracurricular activity, includes the things that I've done on the outside. I have some volunteer interests that are out there. I have some personal interests that are out there. And I want to make sure that that tells the whole story of who I am. Again, when it comes to differentiating yourself, what do I have on the bottom? On the bottom of the third page.
Well, you have your
Under my volunteer work.
personal.
All right, in an interview, am I allowed to ask you how many kids you have? Am I allowed to ask you if you're healthy?
No.
Am I allowed to ask you, how did you get to work today? No. I can't assume you have. I can't, because then it starts saying, you start getting the financial pieces. I cannot ask you those questions as an interviewer, but as someone who is writing a resume, can I answer some of those questions for you without even being asked? Now, looking at those 2 or 3 lines that are there, talk to me about what story that is telling you about Tom. What's it saying?
It's basically saying you're healthy.
Okay?
Right. You're healthy, you're active, or,
A stable home life.
Stable.
Stable on paper.
right.
Healthy on paper.
Healthy on paper. I've missed 3 days and 22 years.
Maybe listen to people's questions that they may not personally ask.
So this piece here is telling you that I like to exercise, I'm healthy, I'm stable, I have outside interests, And I can balance those all together to be successful in my job still. And all are additional skills that I can bring along with me. I had a buddy of mine who had been in the military reserves for 15 years. One of my best friends of all time. And he hands me his resume after being out of work for a couple years, and he says, hey, can you take a look at this? And I said, yeah. First thing I'm seeing is, where's your military? He said, I don't know, it's just a reservist. You mean every month you had to pick a weekend and do something? You were a leader in this company? You put your life on the line? You signed up for this? It better be on the resume. But he didn't correlate, because we think business and we think resume. We didn't think the rest of the things that make you an asset, that make you a resource, that make you special. There are some people out there that are landlords, people that have businesses on the side, people that do these things that make you who you are, that have this skill set. Even if you do plumbing on the side or electronics on the side, all of that can be a skill set that comes in here. Even all the volunteer work that you're doing says, I care. You want those skills to be included in your total picture, because at the bottom of this, it says, here's who I am as a person. Not just an employee, but as a person. And if I get to see the whole rounded you, it's going to be a little easier to say, I want to interview you. I want to find out who you are. So I can't ask those questions, how many kids do you have, and all that other fun stuff. But what I can do as an interviewer is say, I saw on your resume that you like to run. I just finished a marathon. I just had a networking session with somebody and they said, oh, I saw you write books. I write children's books. Bam. Instant connection. You instantly related to somebody, and on paper you're starting to relate to other people by expanding the breadth of who you are beyond just the skills that you've done in the work environment. How many of you have Facebook accounts or LinkedIn accounts or do social media, anything along those lines? Some people are a little hesitant to put their name up, saying, oh, I'm going to get this friend request from them. I only have 2, so you're safe. What I will tell you is, if you are going to do that, you have to assume someone is going to look. I will leave it that easy. So if it means you're going to go out and party every Friday night like I did up until about, well, you have to just make sure that people on it, that you are very comfortable with what's sitting there and what's on there. And if, every once in a while, I don't put a whole lot of comments that are on there. I do periodically, but if somebody puts something in and it's derogatory or political or religious, I'll just go ahead and delete the comment out of there. I just don't want it associated with me, my name, even though someone else wrote it. So those are the things we want to pay attention to. I will tell you, LinkedIn is a very good source that's out there, and I actually received a phone call just a couple weeks ago of someone saying, I saw you on LinkedIn and I'd like to hire you. People are looking. When you do this, just like you would on your resume, is you have to go all in. If you're going to go on LinkedIn and write your name and wrote that you work for this company and for this many years and you call that I'm on LinkedIn, you're not. Because now I start to interpret who you are again as a person. Yes, we all make judgments around here. And if you're only going in with half an effort to put the name of your job and the years that you worked, you haven't done anything. At least go in and copy and paste your resume in here. Because it tells me, are you detail-oriented or are you lazy? Are you doing it just so you can gather names? Are you doing it because you really want this thing to work for you? Your LinkedIn and your Facebook are telling a story about it. Just like your resume is. You have to understand that they are all linked together.